Thanks for joining us for the Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
We're the Youngs. We are glad you've joined us today.
Welcome.
Bethany and I have made several podcasts so far. We've talked about our family verse, and we've spent more than a few podcasts on the subject of communication. Mm-hmm. And when we talked about marriage, we talked about the language of
love.
And how about we talked about mastering the art of communication. And then we've spent several weeks talking to you about communication in our family, with our little children, with our teenagers. Today, Bethany and I want to kind of continue that idea of communication, but also branch it out just a little bit because we want to talk to you about our recent family vacation. And we, in our scheduling recently, Bethany and the kids, my younger two actually,
yes,
had tickets to fly out to see their siblings and our married kids in California. And I was scheduled to be in a revival meeting in the state of Michigan during that time. And of course, COVID-19 came along and shut all of that down. The flights were canceled. Our meetings in Michigan did not take place. Mm-hmm. And then the tickets kept falling lower and lower. And we were able to rebook tickets at a fraction of what they originally cost. And then my son, who was home from college, even myself, we were able to buy tickets as well.
Yes.
And so we were able to fly to California and be with our married children. Bethany, tell our audience just a little bit about our family. We have 5 youngins.
We do. Our oldest is Abigail. She is married to David Adams, and they live in Lancaster, California, and work at Lancaster Baptist Church and West Coast Baptist College. We also have Joshua, who is then married to Bethany. They live in Camarillo, California, and are on staff at Horizon Baptist Church in Camarillo. And then we have Matthew. He is now a college junior, just finished, quote, home college for the last 2 months.
Saw that coming.
But now he's a college junior studying for evangelism and ministry, and he's in a serious relationship with a young lady named Kareth. Then we have Jacob, who is a senior in high school now, and we have Charity, who is our caboose, who will be in 7th grade coming this fall.
Beth and I are just super blessed by our family, and we wanted a large family, and we would have taken easily 10.
Oh.
We would have been happy with that. But God gave us our 5, and it just seems really weird to us. We live in Florida, and we attended college in Florida ourselves, and we kind of thought our children would just follow right along in our footsteps. That was always our expectation. But one of our staff evangelists in our ministry was a graduate of the college in California, and as a result of his influence, our daughter ended up going, and that's where she met her husband. And then our son followed his sister, and that's where he met his wife. And then our next son is there as well.
Right.
And he has decided that he's going to pursue a ministry degree. That was originally maybe a business degree. We were fine with that. I'm in the ministry, and of course, Bethany and I have served in full-time vocational ministry really our entire married life.
Yes.
And yet, we never pushed our kids that way. All we wanted our kids to do were to serve the Lord.
Do what God wants you to do.
To work hard, have a good family, a good life, and use all of their talents and resources to honor and serve God. And so we never thought they lived in California. So our family vacation was a trip to California, and it's been a different vacation. Of course, we had to wear masks on the flight.
Yes.
And at least in the place where our daughter is, it's more strict there.
The mandates are higher.
All the mandates. So we became very familiar with putting on masks and walking around town. I joked that we all looked better because we were all covered up. And it's just so weird because it's hard to see smiles. And we realize when you're doing that, communication is looking at one another. Communication.
Seeing facial expressions.
Thankful for texts. I'm thankful for email. The communication opportunities are huge in our generation, but there is something missing when you can't see a person smile, and you can't see their the full facial features. But we had a wonderful time with our children, and it was a very good vacation. I did preach once while I was out there, so I did a little bit of work while I was there.
And we should insert here that our married children, were not on vacation.
They were not, but we were.
They were not. As much as they can be under the COVID mandates, they are back at work, and
So we had
were
a
on
little
vacation.
more free time than they did, of course. And, I was thinking a lot about the family because we've been talking about communication in the home and all. If you go through the Bible and you read in God's words, of course, the family is all over the Bible. Adam and Eve, in the very early verses and chapters of the Bible, God weds them together. Very soon they're having a family, and then from that point on, you read about families over and over again.
Right.
And when Jesus came into the world, he came into the world in a family. And he was born as a baby and was raised in that family and worked inside that home, and even on the cross was concerned about his mother and made sure that John the Baptist took care of her. There's some passages that in weeks ahead in our podcast, we'll certainly be discussing passages like Proverbs 22:6 about for you that are training children,
Right.
you that are raising them, Deuteronomy 6, Ephesians 4, 5, and 6. There are just some passages that you have to go to. And then there are some stories that really stick out. And the last few days, I've been thinking a lot about the story of Jacob and his family, as well as the story of Job and his family. And the contrast between the two are really huge. Jacob and his sons would have been marked by things like anger and discord and discontentment and angst towards each other. Job and his children, although we know the story, just it turns out really odd in the sense that all of the kids die in one day in a terrible whirlwind, and the house falls on them. It's
Very
just
sad.
a terrible tragedy. But the little glimpse that we get of his family is they're very happy and they're very close.
Right.
And they love each other.
Before the
And
tragedy
before
struck.
the tragedy occurred, there is no doubt that Job's family is one of those illustrations of what we wanted. Beth and I wanted a close family. And we worked really hard to ensure that our kids stood up for each other, loved each other, enjoyed each other. We told our kids all the time, we were homeschoolers, and there is the homeschool idea that, oh my goodness, your children are socially challenged. and maybe other homeschoolers don't have the options ours had, but we were in a different church every week with a
Right.
different youth group. Our kids have friends all over the United States.
True.
And but what we told our kids all the time was that you don't always get the chance to be with your best friend. In fact, most of us who had best friends in high school, I know I had a best friend in high school, and Bethany had best friends in high school. And although we still know each other, the fact of the matter is most of your friends in high school kind of go their direction, you go your direction.
Right.
But
You
our
don't
children,
see each other.
our children stay together.
Yes.
And those are the ones that'll come to your wedding.
Right.
They're the ones that will be there when you have a baby. They're the ones that will watch your children when you need a vacation away from the kids. They're the ones that will, as odd as this sounds, they'll be the ones that'll come to your funeral. So family is vitally important. As Beth and I took this vacation, there were several factors that stood out to us that we wanted to share with you today. And the first one was there's a time factor that we want to talk to you about. There's a blessing factor we want to talk to you about.
Yes.
And there's a communication factor. So, Beth, let's talk about the time factor a little bit. 22 years, our oldest now is 24.
Yes, Abby's 24.
24 years go by really
Yes.
fast. And you that have grown children probably are sitting there shaking your head. And you that have a 2-year-old are probably sitting there thinking to yourself, not fast enough.
Not fast enough.
It's amazing how you see time differently on the beginning and the ending. And we are aware of the fact that 24 years are not very long. Not very long at all.
No, it's really a blink of an eye.
But
Seems
on the other hand, we're also aware that 24 years is a long time.
right when you're in the dailiness of it.
And what's amazing about it is that Beth and I were reminded that time is an essential ingredient in having a godly home. So we were thinking about how that when our kids were younger, the key word probably then was training. It took how long does it take to train a child? Well, apparently in God's eyes, about
A long time.
18 years, maybe 19 or 20. And there's no doubt that it takes a ton of time to train a child to overcome their weaknesses and to teach them and to help them. And so Beth and I thought we would just take a moment for you that are raising children, whether you have a baby, a 1-year-old, a toddler, what we call tweenies today, or a teenager. Don't be discouraged. With your children, realize that God has given you time. And
Yes.
take advantage of the time. You got to be teaching.
Right. Don't be discouraged in the midst of the chaos.
Sure.
Understand that you still have tomorrow
Yes.
and next week.
And next month.
Yes.
And our Jacob is 17, just turned 17. And in a sense, we're aware of the fact that this time next year he'll be graduating high school, and all things being equal anyway. And in a few months from now, a year away, he'll be heading off to college.
Yes.
Is our plan and his plan. And yet we have a year. And are there things that we still need to teach Jacob and areas where he still needs to grow? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we have a year to work. We have another year to invest and to correct things and to strengthen areas and
Yes.
lots of talking. I know in our family devotions over the last few days, I've been asking questions. We read Romans 12, and my question to our children here at home was, are you completely dedicated? Absolutely dedicated to God. Mm-hmm. Have you just given him everything? Is he number one in your life? We read yesterday in our family devotions from Philippians, for to me to live is Christ. Mm-hmm. So there's a training factor involved. And Beth and I also want to talk to you that, or there's a time factor involved, rather. We want to talk to you that probably many of you listening, you're not raising kids anymore. They're grown. And one of the things we find in our meetings is that a lot of people are concerned about their adult children.
Right.
And we're on that place in our life right now where, and I say this humbly and with an awareness that life changes. Mm-hmm. But right now, we're pretty blessed. We look at our adult children, they're doing well.
They are.
We're happy with their marriages. Mm-hmm. We're hoping that if they're listening to this podcast, that they will understand that grandchildren are a blessing. And though I'm a little worried about that, I know that as soon as we find out grandkids are on the way, that my wife's going to be spending a lot of money about this. And we're for that. But the fact of the matter is some of you are concerned. I was thinking about the prodigal son. And
right.
In the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, we've heard people take that to say, well, good luck parenting because God, he's a perfect father. He's in the picture of the prodigal son and the prodigal son's father. God is the father, and we are the sons. And some will say, well, good luck because even God has kids who turn out really poorly. But the point of the story of the prodigal son is not as much about parenting and having perfect children as much as it is training them and showing them there's a way back to God. And we're all going to fail. I have, I'm sure you listeners have.
Yes.
My wife never has. That's good brownie points there, gentlemen. Take note of that. But the fact is, your grown children may be of concern to you, but Beth and I just want to remind you there's several things you can do. You can love them.
Yes.
And even when they're not well, you can say, I love you. You can pursue them. You can have meals with them.
Absolutely.
You can keep that door of love open. You can continue to build a relationship with them. And just like the prodigal son, there came a time in his rebellion, is that the right word? His failure, that he said, you know what, things are better at home. I wish I had what my dad has.
Right.
I need what my dad has.
Right.
And he knew where to go. He knew how to get home. And I guess if you have children at home, model how to make things right, because it's important that your kids be able to come back. So if your kids aren't well and your kids are they're out of the house, they're married, they're raising your grandchildren, make sure that you're continuing to love them. Right. You're keeping the door open.
Right.
And then Beth and I would say to you, pray for them.
Absolutely.
And pray every day. Pray for them by name.
Yes.
Ask God to continue to work in their heart. I'll give you an encouraging verse. Philippians 1:6 is from the Apostle Paul. And help me out here, so I'll make sure I get it right.
Being confident.
Being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it.
Yes.
And that is a verse written to a church. Paul is saying to the church at Philippi, you're important to God. He loves you. He cares about you. And what he's saying to there is that in God's work in your heart, he started a work and he will accomplish it. And one day it dawned on me that that's true of our children. God loves our children more than Beth and I love our children. God cares about our kids more than we care about our kids. And if it's true that he can do a work in the hearts of a church at Philippi, even though they were made up of sinful people just like the rest of us, then you can pray about your children and trust them to God. And keep praying that God will do his work.
And you don't have to be afraid. I think there are so many parents that are afraid.
Oh, that's really good, sure.
That their teenage children, once they get out of the house, are going to do wrong. And, children do make choices that they shouldn't make. Your adult children may be making choices you are not happy with, but we can be confident that God is working in their life, and so we don't have to be afraid.
Yeah, that's really true. That's so good. So there's a time factor. We learned that in our family vacation. We were reminded of that. But we were also reminded of a blessing factor. And I just, Beth and I just wanted to say to you just very simply that there's something blessed about watching our children taking steps toward God on their own.
Yes.
And what a blessing that is for those of us who are Christian parents. One of our desires, one of our goals, one of our heartbeats is that our children start taking steps toward God on their own.
Yes.
And that involves things like their own devotional life. We tell our kids that, I tell my sons all the time, okay, God's called you to lead. You're a man. And don't wait till you're married and lead your family. You got to start leading now.
Right.
You got to do right in the youth group.
Right.
You got to be the one that takes a stand for what's right.
Right.
And when you see your kids stepping towards God on their own, that's amazing. And one of the blessings of being out with our adult children was we saw that so vividly.
Right.
David and Abby are just serving God on their own. They are witnessing to their neighbors. They're serving in their church.
Right.
They're working to have a Christian family of their own. And we certainly saw that in our Joshua and Bethany as they're serving God together. They're
Yes.
Spending time with their church family. They're involved in their church ministries.
Right. Both of them working on their marriages.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
they're taking steps of righteousness toward God.
Yes.
That is a blessing factor, and that's what you want your kids to do. And you that have young children, push them. That's why you got to be faithful to church. That's why you've got to have family devotions. You don't have to have a revival meeting in your house. You don't have to have take an offering and all. Our family devotions have just been a simple matter of stopping each evening and reading something from the Bible. Sometimes we read out loud together. Sometimes I read a couple of verses. Sometimes I've read a chapter from a story or an illustration from a book. And then we just share prayer requests or things we're thankful for.
Right.
Because we're trying to help our kids to step toward God. And so there's a blessing factor. And then there is a blessing in not just seeing them step towards God, but seeing them step towards responsibility. And that was really awesome on this trip.
Right. Watching them, as the term is these days, adult on
They
their
were
own.
Adulting. Yeah. David and Abby have their own home. They rent it.
Yes.
Joshua and Bethany rent an apartment. But to see how they had decorated it.
Yes, they own it.
They own it, and they're taking care of it. Each of our children have their own vehicles now, and to see them taking care of their own vehicles.
Yes.
And their yard, taking care of their own, yard and flowers and plants and
Budgeting.
meals and budgeting. There's a great blessing in a successful family.
Yes.
And so there's a time factor. There's a blessing factor. And in the time we have left today, we want to talk to you about there's also a communication factor.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really big one. And sweetheart, talk to our audience about all the things we learned about communication. I know we were doing a lot of catching up and
Right.
so
Well,
forth.
I would say that we had different types of communication while we were out there. Of course, there was the catching up, just the daily. How have you been doing? Oh my goodness, look at your apartment. Look at your house. Look at all you guys have done.
This trip was the first time we had seen that.
It was. And so we were able to just do that daily catch up. We were able to linger over meals and just talk. And of course, the siblings all being together, things would get crazy and goofy and we would laugh until we cried. So just that lingering. But David had mentioned before we started the podcast that it was a lot of listening. When you have adult children, they have a lot to say. And even if it's just over their daily life, over a simple thing like a recipe or a decoration or a car or a budget or
Just things
working.
they're learning.
Yes, things they're learning.
Married life.
We did a lot of listening. And I think we texted our adult kids last night. We were on a date and we were talking about the podcast, and David said, the direction he wanted to go with this podcast. And I said, well, we should text our adult kids and make sure that we're not going to say something that they're like, no, that didn't happen that way. So we want to make sure that we were all on the same page. And so I just texted and I said, hey, we're going to do this on communication. Is there anything you could add? And they all, well, I think Joshua didn't get to it, but Bethany did. They all texted back and said, we just loved that we had, in their words, we had chill and hangout time. We were just chilling.
Nothing
just
I didn't
talking.
know we were chill.
No, we didn't know. But they did. And that was the one thing that they said that they enjoyed, was that we were just chilling. And we took that as we were listening. And I think that's important to your adult kids. The other thing that we did, not just the daily minutia of conversation, but we had some serious conversations.
Sure.
Your adult children have burdens on their heart that they want to share, and they want a safe place to share that. They want a biblical place to share that. So we were able not just to listen to daily stuff, but we were able to listen to their burdens. We were able to let them share their heart, share their thoughts in a safe place. And then if they were asking advice, then we could give them some biblical counsel. There were times where they were just sharing, and you have to kind of discern if they actually want you to open your mouth and say something about that and give them direction. I know that there are parents of adult children who feel like they just need to jump in every time, even if it's just a daily thing. Oh, I have this recipe, Mom. It's really good. Oh, wait, you know what you should be doing with that recipe? No, don't go there. If your child has an ask, and then really, if they're sharing something serious, then you should just stop and listen and inquire. Well, would you like me to tell you what the Bible would do here, or what God would have you to do, or what we learned a long time ago in our ministry, and then just share it. So
it's a good reminder too, to remember the old adage, the old saying that accusations harden. So if you're really fast to say, well, you did that wrong, or I think you shouldn't have done it that way, that's an accusation,
right.
And it causes by nature a bristle in the response.
It does.
But to ask questions, to say, well, what, is there anything you're doing about it, or anything you think you could do about it?
Right.
And many times when you begin to ask questions, and this is a huge statement we've mentioned several times in our communication thoughts, asking questions is a key, because then it opens the door for dialogue.
Yes.
And it goes back here to even this time factor. I'm going back to the first thing we talked about today, Bethley's statements there. It takes time to sit and listen.
It does.
And our culture is so fast. Everybody's
Yes.
running and moving and going and texting, and many times we'll go into a home to visit someone and the TV's on the entire time, which is, it's fine. That's every family can do what they want to do. But there's a distraction there.
Right.
You never finish a conversation because a commercial comes on, which catches everybody's attention.
Right.
And the fact that we sat without a TV on and listened.
Right.
And asked
Phones
questions.
put away.
And we talked. and we talked about, every kind of things. And then we laughed and we joked.
Right.
I will say to you younger parents that doesn't happen once your kids become adults.
No.
That happens right now.
Yeah. Table time should be a regular part of your week, if you can make it that
Having
way.
a meal together. We all eat.
Yes.
And having a meal together as a family in which you listen to each other, in which you ask questions, even maybe think through what questions could you ask. Sometimes we ask questions that, have a grunt answer or a yes or no, but asking questions that require a longer answer, something like, Bethley said to our children yesterday, what was your favorite part of this day? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't say yes to that one unless you totally miss the question.
Right.
But that required an answer, and each of our children had a different answer. And I was driving. I think were we driving when you asked that question?
Yes.
And I just was interested. I found it very interesting the different answers they gave, the things that they enjoyed most about the day. It's interesting too that one of the things we did on this trip was we prayed together with our kids.
We did.
And that was very special when we could have prayer together.
Yes.
And all of us have to work at that in our culture. I know Bethley's family, her family had meals together, and so did mine when we were growing up. We had meals together, we talked.
Right.
And that makes the family very close. And so this has been an incredible time with our adult children. And any other thoughts you had?
I would say, your adult children have their own home. They have their own life. And while one of that couple did grow up in your home, the other person in that couple did not grow up in your home. And so they're going to do things differently. They're going to start their own life. And I know as parents, sometimes you think, oh, I would never do it that way, or I wouldn't shop that way, or I wouldn't budget that way, or whatever it is. Well, you have to just stand back and let them do their thing, and then look for ways that you can encourage and edify and bless them by saying, wow, you did such a good job with that. I love that. I love the way you decorated. I love the way you're budgeting. I love the way you guys get together and that you are affectionate with each other. So looking for ways to encourage them instead of looking for ways to give those little jabs of, oh, your wife doesn't do it the way I do, or whatever.
Yeah, one of the things we did on this trip was we let them lead.
Yes.
We were their guests. It was their home, their apartment. Mm-hmm. And by letting them lead, we didn't just let them lead, we followed joyfully.
Yes.
So I know sometimes as your kids get older, they'll do something different, and you have to do it because it's their life.
Right.
And there's two ways to do that. You can do it unhappily. You can roll your eyes and sigh and make snide remarks, which puts a wedge between you and your children.
Right.
Or you can just jump on board and say, hey, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And
they
anytime,
did everything.
Yeah.
They planned the menu. They did all the shopping. They planned the schedule, and we had a wonderful time.
There were several meals that we had never eaten that particular meal before. And yet it was new to us because my son-in-law, that was one of his meals that he likes.
Right.
So my daughter prepared a meal for her husband, and we got exposed to a different meal than we would normally have, and it was really good. And we just did it joyfully.
Right.
And, I know our time's about gone today, but I did just want to remind all of you that are listening, family is so important.
It is.
The culture we live in minimizes children, ridicules righteousness. But Beth and I just wanted to come to you today and share some encouragement about our family vacation.
Right.
It takes a lot of time to have a godly home, but it is time so beautifully invested.
And what we just enjoyed started 24 years ago.
24 years ago. When we would listen to messages in those days. There were no podcasts.
Right.
But we would listen to messages and say, you know what, we could add that to our home.
Yes.
And we would read a book and say, you know what, that didn't work. I didn't like that, but boy, let's try this.
Right.
And this is how we could train this child to overcome this weakness. This is how we could correct. They got in their teen years. This is how we're going to teach them to do this. This is how we're going to train them to do that.
Right.
We spent hours, times of taking walks just to say, hey, I got to talk to you about something. And all of that's paid off. And we still got a long way to go. We still have we still have a 7th grader, and we still have a junior, and we still have a kid in college that's not married yet. But we just want to come to you today and tell you, keep working at your family.
Yeah, it's worth it.
It's so worth it. So we're so glad that we've been able to have you listening today. This is Keeping It Young, and our time is gone. Thank you so much for joining us. Belty and I are very, very happy and honored to be a part of your lives. And I hope you have a great day.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production. All rights reserved.